Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today you are checking out a brand new Stamina Necromancer PvP build for the Elsweyr chapter. And we're going full on archer for this setup, running 7 pieces of medium, running bow on both bars, and the burst damage is just insane. So if you're looking for a Necromancer build that's a little bit different, a little bit unique, and can do tons of burst damage even at full range, then definitely check this one out. I think you're gonna enjoy it. As usual, we'll go over the stats, the gear choices, some different skills you can use, champion points, and more coming up next. Alright, jumping into the stats first on the build. Brand new character, I don't even have a title yet. Sure. Okay, we have 14.5k max magicka, 17k health that will go up in PvP to about 22,000. Maximum stamina is coming in at 36, almost 37,000. For our recoveries, those do go up with both our potion and some of our summoning passives here, so checking that out. Magicka recovery 850, health recovery 150, stamina recovery is about 1800. Our weapon damage is about 3,300. That's with our weapon power potion, and that does go up with our back bar berserker glyph. So that will be basically 4k weapon damage, 48% weapon critical, and our resistances do go up as well with our armor buff. So about 16,000 spell and physical, 3k crit resistance. Now, I will say this is sort of a glass cannon build, so just keep that in mind. Full on medium armor. I did not build out a lot of resistances. The point of the build is just to do tons of burst damage and then get away and find a new target. So keep that in mind. We do have a few other survival tools that I will talk about in the kit as well. 64 points into max stamina. I am using the purple tri-stat food here, giving me bonuses to health, stamina, and magicka. A lot of overall stats are getting added by this food, and I really needed this, I thought, just because Stamina Necromancer is going to use a fair amount of magicka abilities, especially the way I've set up this ranged build, so I like this. Now, I am a vampire on the build. That is optional, but I'll kind of show you with the skills how that comes into play and why I like it, but definitely not necessary. I am using the Serpent Mundus, and that just has to do with the food I'm using. This puts my recovery at a very good level, even in no CP and Battlegrounds. For the race on this build, I decided to go with REDGUARD. REDGUARD is optimal, I think, for a ranged build, especially a bow setup. Check out the passives here. We've got 8% cost reduction on weapon abilities. All of our bow abilities are going to be reduced. Reduced snare effectiveness is pretty good. Max stamina boost is also good. And then Adrenaline Rush, this works off of bow abilities, not just melee damage anymore. So you get 950, almost 1,000 stamina back every 5 seconds when you deal direct damage. So we'll be doing that all the time. It's a nice source of sustain on any stamina range build for sure. For the potions, again, I am using Essence of Weapon Power. That's because I am not using Rally on this buff. I also do not have a weapon crit bonus, so this is giving me both of those, plus some nice stamina sustain. Once we talk about skills, I'll show you where you could run Rally if you want to switch to a bow two-hander setup, and then you could obviously change out your potions a little bit if you wanted to. Switching over to our gear, first 5-piece set that we are using is the Spriggan's Thorns set. Great max damage setup, and that's the focus of this build. So we've got 2 max stamina bonuses. We've got the nice weapon damage on the 4-piece, and the 5-piece bonus gives us a little over 3k physical penetration. Very good for doing as much damage as possible. Great for both CP and non-CP. Just a great all-around set, especially for a bow build where you most likely will not have any penetration debuffs that you're able to run. So I am using Spriggan's weapons, Spriggan's bows on my main version of this build. Front bar bow, I'm going to recommend Nirnhoned. Nirnhoned just gives you the most weapon damage possible for this build. It's a great trait, so you will have to retrait this, but I think it's definitely worth the 50 transmute stones to get that done. I am using poisons here on my front bar, so that is the double damage, double health poison. Gives us 2 really strong poison dots, and those have a 10-second cooldown, so this adds a ton of just pressure damage to an already very bursty build. Back bar, I've also got another Spriggan's Bow, and this is going to be infused, and that's because we are using the Berserker enchant on the back bar. It gives us 450 plus weapon damage for 5 seconds, and that does have a 5-second cooldown if you're using the infused trait. So every 5 seconds, we just switch to the back bar, hit light attack or a poison injection to proc this, and it gets our weapon damage basically at 4k. Our other pieces that we are using here is just Spriggan's Jewelry. This is really easy to get. You can either farm it yourself. Bankarai is the zone. You can just run a couple dolmens there. You can also pick these up from guild traders. So I am using all robust on those, and then all 3 are weapon damage enchanted. So going along with our burst damage build, the other kind of new set I'm trying out on this build is going to be Shield Breaker, and Shield Breaker did get changed for the Elsweyr chapter. So what it does now is it gives you max stamina, stamina recovery, weapon damage, and then the 5 piece is really what changed. It increases your damage done by 6%, and then the effect is doubled when attacking shielded targets. So I like the extra 6%. I think it's going to get rolled down a little bit with your damage modifiers. I don't think it's going to be exactly 6%, but I do notice the difference. It does help push my damage higher. So if you have the extra Telvar stones, this is from Imperial City, definitely worth picking up a 5 piece because you can get this 5 pieces on the body, and you can get it directly in Impenetrable from the Imperial City vendors. And so it'll only take you maybe 10,000 or maybe a little bit more Telvar stones to get all 5 pieces. Definitely worth checking out for this patch. It does a lot of nice damage overall. So like I mentioned, I'm using that on the body. So I've got medium, feet, legs, hands, waist, and chest. All impenetrable. That's the default that it comes in, all max stamina. And then for our last set here with the monster 2-piece, I went with Slimecraw for even more burst damage. So the 1 piece here gives us a nice bit of weapon critical. And then for the 2-piece, we get Minor Berserk at all times, increases our damage done by 8%. This is great for any medium armor build to increase your burst potential. The buff is on at all times, and it makes our really hard-hitting abilities hit even harder. So great 2-piece monster set there. I definitely recommend it. I'm running that in medium as well. So overall, I have 7 pieces of medium. Gives us a lot of extra weapon critical and stamina recovery, stamina cost reduction, all those great medium armor passives that are really going to help this build out. Now, in terms of gear options here, I know some of you might not actually have this set. It does take some time to farm Telvar. So what I would also recommend here, if you don't have Shield Breaker, if you feel like you need more sustain on your Stamina Necro, definitely you can replace this with Bone Pirate. Bone Pirate will give you lots of stamina and stamina recovery. So that'll be great for sustain. I felt like my sustain was good enough, and I wanted to build for pure damage. Now, if you want another damage-oriented set that's not Shield Breaker, another great option would be just crafting Hunding's Rage for your body or even your weapons. Hunding's Rage will actually give you higher weapon damage, higher weapon critical. So that will actually give you pretty decent damage and a nice buff to your healing. So that's another really good option if you don't have the Shield Breaker set. And if you're looking to substitute something for Slimecraw, maybe you don't have that yet, you can run any 2 monster pieces that have weapon damage. So like 1 piece of Veladreth, 1 piece of Molokina, that will give you even higher weapon damage for those 2 pieces. So I think that covers the gear. Let's go ahead and jump into the skills next. Starting on our front bar, we've got Venom Skull. Venom Skull does very good damage, and every 3rd cast you get a 20% bonus to your damage. So I like this for kind of a finisher. We don't have an execute specifically on the build. So Venom Skull kind of ends up being that finishing skill where you've got that enemy like below 10% health. Just spam them with some Venom Skulls, and that should take care of everything else. Does great damage, and like I said, you get that bonus damage every 3rd cast. Next up, we've got Draining Shot, and this is our defensive and offensive stun. I don't like using this unless I need the stun because the damage isn't great. The damage is okay, but really we're using it for the stun offensively as well as defensively for the heal. You can see after the stun ends, you heal for 9, almost 10k health. So since we aren't actually using rally on the way I've set this up, the draining shot heal kind of functions as a burst heal. So you can pop this off against 2-3 targets if you really need to and get some quick heals coming in. And then of course, when you're on the offense, you can put this stun in as part of your burst combo. Now next up, we've got a defensive front bar skill. This is Elusive Mist. Gives us major expedition for 4 seconds and then reduces our damage taken by 75%. This skill is so great on a ranged stamina build, on an archer style build. I love this skill. Basically, as soon as you start taking pressure, you can pop into mist form, get some line of sight, go around the corner, reset your buffs, and then get back into the fight. You can heal up. So I really like having that on the front bar. It also gets rid of snares and immobilizations, which is equally important since we're not using forward momentum, race against time, or any of those other buffs that have those effects. Keep in mind that you cannot be healed while you're in mist form. Also, your magicka recovery stops. But like I said, it's really just to get yourself out of trouble, to reposition yourself, and to avoid taking damage. Next up, we've got Lethal Arrow, and this did get a bit of a nerf in the Elsweyr chapter. Still does pretty good damage, especially if you get a crit on your Lethal Arrow. It now gives minor defile instead of major defile, but that's actually really good for this build because one of our other Necro skills is giving us major defile. So with this, we actually are stacking both major and minor defiles on a single target. It's pretty strong, shuts healers down big time. You definitely will not be spamming this. It's really just kind of like a one-shot burst that is part of your combo, basically. So I'll go over the combo in a little bit, but definitely a great skill for that debuff and the burst potential. So our last regular skill here on the front bar, kind of a flex spot. Right now I'm using the Stamina Coil. This gives us health over time, really not that good healing, but the stamina recovery is pretty decent. About 3k stamina back over 12 seconds. It also increases your healing done by 3%. So I like this. It does cost magicka. That's another reason why you'll need a pretty high magicka recovery and magicka pool. We have 2 magicka abilities on the front bar, Elusive Mist and Coil, and then we have 2 on the back bar, actually, our buffs. So if you're having trouble sustaining this or you just don't like it that much, you could put other things here, such as Expert Hunter. Expert Hunter will give you extra weapon damage, an extra 3% weapon damage from the Fighters Guild passives. You'll also get your crit bonus passively. It'll help you find stealth enemies like Night Blades. That's another nice option. You can use the Expunge ability as well. This costs health, but it does remove negative effects. The morph I like here gives me magicka and stamina back for each negative effect that's removed. Also gives you 3% cost reduction, so a pretty nice option there as well. So you can think about what you want there. I'm using Coil for now. Then the front bar ultimate, I think there's really just basically one choice for a bow build, and that's going to be Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now, Flawless doesn't give you nearly as much damage as the other morph Dawnbreaker of Smiting. It also does not give you the stun, but what it does is it gives you 5% bonus weapon damage. And then we also have our Fighters Guild passive that gives us 3% on top of that. So basically 8% weapon damage from having this ultimate slotted. Most of the time I'm not going to use this because I'm a ranged build. I don't want to get that close to use this. But sometimes I will use it just for the AoE splash damage. It does a nice dot as well. But again, just mostly for passives. We have a much stronger ultimate back bar, which we'll talk about in a second. So speaking of that back bar, this is our infused bow, the way I'm doing this right now. So I like running Poison Injection there. Poison Injection is a really easy way to proc that Berserker glyph, giving us about 500 extra weapon damage. If you have a Master's Bow, you could even put a Master's Bow back bar and give yourself even more weapon damage on a single target. Then obviously this just gives us a really nice damage over time. It does execute damage, so it does do more the lower health your enemy is. Next up, we've got Blast Bones. Blast Bones is our big AoE burst damage. You can see it's doing about 14, 15k unbuffed there. It is applying Major Defile as well, which we talked about. Now, the timing of this is tricky, as well as the range. You really have to practice this ability. That's kind of what I've been working on this week. There's kind of a sweet spot where you get a certain range from your target. You cast your Blast Bones, and it'll actually jump. It'll like leap on top of your target. So I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. This is also our slowest casting ability. It takes 2.5 seconds to cast, and then it runs onto the target. So this ends up being, maybe like 3.5 seconds of a timed attack. But with that in mind, it's really awesome for burst builds because you can time this with your poison injection, with your lethal arrow, with your skulls for just an insane amount of burst, all ending at the same time. So we'll talk more about that combo in a second. Next up, we've got Resolving Vigor. You definitely need this, especially since I'm not running Rally with this current version of the build. So Vigor just gives us a really strong heal over time that helps us stay alive. Definitely need this. And then we just got our 2 buffs here. So Summoner's Armor gives us Major Resolve, Major Ward. It also reduces the cost of our Blast Bones, so that's good. And then for the pet here, I actually went with Spirit Guardian. And you might be saying, well, why not the Skeletal Archer? I thought Necromancer's got an Archer pet. They do, but I just think, especially if you're doing no CP in Battleground, Spirit Guardian is a little bit better because it gives you this 10% damage mitigation, which is actually pretty strong. So while this pet is active, 10% of the damage you take goes to the spirit instead. That's any kind of damage. Could be direct damage, damage over time, AoE damage. They're going to pull that damage onto them, take it off of you. So even though we are pretty squishy, this, as well as the Mistform, this is kind of our survivability. So it does help quite a bit. That 10% is noticeable for sure. And then last but not least, we've got our ultimate here. I'm choosing to do the Colossus. Now you can do either version. You can do Glacial, which does a stun. You can do, I think it's Pestilent Colossus that gives you a little bit more damage on each cast. This is just a great AoE ultimate. It does that major vulnerability and just tons of damage for 3 seconds. So I definitely recommend this. It does cost quite a bit, $225. So you won't have this up all that often. But when you do, definitely think about saving it for groups of enemies that kind of cluster together. Just drop it down and then throw in some stuns, throw in some lethal arrows. And you'll be good to go. And then just really quickly, let's say you tried Bobo and you don't like having that and you need a little bit more healing. You can actually switch to a 2-hander on the back bar. And the way I would do that is I would take my poison injection, put it here on the front bar instead of coil. And then I would just switch this poison injection to Rally. Rally will give you a nice burst heal. So that's another option to run the build as a bow and 2-handed back bar. Definitely check that out. But for me, I just like the extra burst potential of using 2 bows here. So in terms of passives, I do want to talk briefly about Necro passives because they're really good. Some are better than others, but you definitely want to get as much of these as you can. Under Gravelord, all of these are great. Reusable parts reduces cost of your summons. Death Knell gives you extra critical strike chance in execute range, so that's awesome. Dismember, it gives you passive spell and physical penetration. This is really great. And then Rapid Rot actually buffs our damage over times. It's poison injection, our poisons that we're using on the front bar, for example. All those will get buffed. Under Bone Tyrant, you do get some nice sustain from this Death Gleaning passive, 200 Magicka and Stamina anytime an enemy dies. Disdain Harm, not that useful for us, neither is Health Avarice, but definitely grab the last passive here. This gives you a passive boost to your health, 1250 health just for doing nothing, basically. So this is really good, especially on my REDGUARD that I've chosen since I don't have any passive racial boost to health. This is basically an extra race passive that I get for free. So really nice. And then under Living Death, you get some healing and some summoning passives here. So if you do have a debuff on you, your healing done is increased. Your Death gives you extra critical strike chance with your healing abilities. You do get 10 ultimate every time you consume a corpse. On this build that is getting used with Mortal Coil. This is really one of the main abilities that we are using on Stam Necro that consumes a corpse. So we are actually getting 10 ultimate back every time we use that. So that's really good. And then here's one of the best ones, one of my favorites. When you have either your mage, your blast bones, or your mender active, you get 200 extra stamina and magical recovery. This is awesome. Just make sure you keep your spirit mender up. Like I mentioned, you can also choose to use the skeletal archer for a little bit more damage, but you won't have the 10% damage mitigation if you do the archer. Weapon passives, if you're doing the bow setup, just grab everything from your bow passives. Really easy, really simple. Medium armor passives, grab all of these except for sneak. We really are not using sneak on the build unless you want to. You can grab those. Vampire, I did mention I am a vampire mostly for elusive mist, but also for the extra recovery. 10% extra magicka and stamina recovery is a big deal, especially if you want to take this build into battlegrounds, for example. This will help make up for your loss of champion point recovery bonuses. So I really like it. Undeath is also a nice passive. Reduces your damage taken by up to 33%. Player's Guild, you want the Slayer passive. This gives us just 3% extra weapon damage on that ultimate that we talked about. Banish the Wicked, 9 ultimate. When you kill Undead, Daedra, or Werewolf. Skill Tracker means you do more damage with your Dawnbreaker if you happen to use it. You want Combat Frenzy. I'm not there yet under my Assault. Racial skills, obviously all of these. And then a very important one, since we are using potions on cooldown, we will want Medicinal Use level 3. This is so important because it keeps our weapon damage and our weapon crit buffs, which we're getting from our potions, up 100% of the time. So definitely level this up and get 3 points into Medicinal Use. Let's jump into the champion points really quick. So most of the clips I got on this build are for Battlegrounds, but I think it'll be just as good, if not stronger, in a CP campaign. Here's what I would recommend. So in the Green Tree, 37 Warlord, 35 Sprinter, 32 into Arcanist, 64 into Mooncalf, 23 Shadow Ward, 44 into Tumbling, and 35 into Befoul. Over in the Blue Tree, 19 into Blessed, 35 Physical Weapon Expert for those light attacks, 61 Master at Arms, 7 into Shattering Blows, 40 into Thaumaturge, 23 Precise Strikes, 42 Piercing, 43 Mighty. In the Red Tree, we've got 61 Ironclad, 54 Resistant, 43 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 37 Thick-Skinned, and 32 into Quick Recovery. And last but not least, let's just talk about some combos that you can practice for the build. I will include some gameplay at the end of this video, so make sure you check that out. But just to break it down, you obviously want to be buffed on your back bar. That's your armor and your mender. And then the first ability that you always want to start with on your back bar is going to be that Blast Bones. For the reasons that we talked about, it just takes the longest to cast. Now you saw there what I was kind of talking about with Blast Bones. If you find the right distance, it'll actually jump on your target. So if you cast it too close, all it does is just run up to them. And it's pretty easy to either dodge roll or avoid it in some way, block, heal through it. But if you get a little bit further back, it'll actually like run a couple steps and then jump on top of them. So it seems to be a little bit faster this way. Well, that's what I just try to do anyways, is just kind of get about this distance before I pull up my Blast Bones. And then obviously while you're summoning that, you're going to want to light attack into a poison injection to get your Berserker glyph going. So that would look something like this. Blast Bones, light attack, poison injection. That's going to get that poison injection dot going. You see our weapon damage buff for 5 seconds gets going. And at that point, you can bar swap to your front bar and then start channeling your lethal arrow, which takes about a second to channel that. So that whole thing with the bar swap, you're going to do Blast Bones, Poison Injection, bar swap, Lethal Arrow. And you can see the Blast Bones and the Lethal Arrow hit at the same time, just doing tons of damage. But there's more. There's more because when you're using Lethal Arrow, you can actually kind of cancel it since it has such a long travel time. You can see that it's about like almost a 1 second travel time. You can actually cancel Lethal Arrow with another light attack and the Venom Skull underneath. So that looks kind of like this. Lethal Arrow, light attack, Venom Skull. And then a little bit faster. So those should basically land about the same time. There's like a split second apart. So the whole thing there is going to be Blast Bones, Poison Injection, Swap, Lethal Arrow, Skull. That's the Holt Burst combo. You can switch it up if you like. One thing I sometimes will do is Lethal Arrow into a Draining Shot. You won't see the stun on the target dummy, but that would push them back, stun them, and you could just throw in a couple more skulls to finish them off, or you could just reset the combo and start again. Another trick here with the ultimate is a lot of players are getting used to seeing this ultimate. So as soon as you throw it down, you want to bar swap and then stun with a Draining Shot, ideally pushing them back further into the ultimate. So you'd cast the ultimate over here, bar swap, Draining Shot, push them back into it, and then ideally they'll take all three damage sources then. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for the Bones and Arrows Stamina Necro PvP build. Hope you guys enjoyed this first Necromancer build for the Elsweyr chapter. If you did, as always, crush that like button for me. Leave a comment letting me know what you think down in the comment section below. And share this video. I would really appreciate it. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for lots of more Elsweyr build videos coming up in the future. I create those videos every week on this channel and we just kind of have fun talking about different theory crafting ideas and enjoying the game of ESO. So until then, thank you all again for watching. Appreciate it. And I will see you around in the next video. Thanks.